What's up everyone, my name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I'm going to be showing you through iZotope's new plugin, Phase Plant. I'm going to be showing you, just an overview of the plugin, the kind of stuff that it can do, my overall opinion of the plugin, what I think it's used best for, and I'm going to show you how to make this snare using one instance of Phase Plant. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what I like most about this plugin, and the thing that I enjoy the most by far is how modular this plugin is. This is the most modular plugin that I have seen almost ever. And if you're wondering what exactly I mean by modular, it's like you can almost assemble the plugin yourself. Like you can kind of put things together and do things yourself in whatever order you please. Like Serum has a very modular effect rack, and I really like this, but I think this even trumps that. Like if I were to add a generator, like let's say I wanted to add a generator in this big generators section, then I could add a wavetable right there. And now I have a wavetable thing that's very similar to Serum. And of course, Serum has two wavetables. So let's say I want to add another one. It's very easy. I can just hit the wavetable. But Serum does not allow you to have three wavetables. Phase Plant, on the other hand, 100% does. In fact, if I want to, I can add 4 wavetables. I can add an infinite amount of just like wavetables, or if I want like analog synthesizers or noise, there's a sampler in here. Yeah, there's a bunch of options, and I can add a bunch of them. I've never reached the limit. Now, I don't know if there is a limit, but if there is, it's gonna be pretty high up that I don't think it's going to bother most people. So to start out with the generators, we just have some analog generators right here. It's just a saw wave, and we can change between the square wave, triangle, and sine. And this is very basic. And it's automatically routed in this system to this little out lane right here. And I can turn the lanes off. Like let's say if I were to turn off the out lane, I would hear nothing because nothing's going out. It requires this little piece to actually go out and into the effect rack. So I can just add maybe a bit of release. I can turn down the sustain, the decay, and I can adjust the curve. See, now I have a little sine pluck. And there's a bunch of things I can change here, like I could change the sync. And that gets a little strange. There's unison, obviously. I can spread it out a little bit. Make it very wide, and the blend is just kind of a dry wet. That's very similar in Serum. And if I have the square selected, I can always use pulse width modulation. So that's pretty basic when it comes to the analog and the out, but let's say I don't want this at all. Let me just delete this group that we have right here. Let's say I want some noise. This is a very basic noise oscillator. Just normal noise, and you can change the slope from like white noise to brown noise. Like right here we have white noise, much higher frequency, and then we have some brown noise that are much lower in frequency. We also can control the stereo, so you can have some handy little stereo noise there. You wouldn't have to create two different noises. And again, it just goes right into the out. For the wavetable, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to be very similar to the way Serum works with wavetables. However, you can actually also use Serum wavetables inside this plugin. Like for example, we have the default wavetables, and there's all the stuff in here. You have some pretty cool growls if you want to use those. And it works very similar, but you have a couple of things that are different. The first one is the way that you kind of shift things around as far as the volume and the pitch and stuff like this. You have the level, which is pretty obvious right here. Goes all the way up to 200, but I'm just gonna leave it at 100 for right now. You have the semitones, which you can actually see it changing in speed as far as the animation there. I kind of like that. Then you have the sense, obviously, which is just the same thing, just more fine-tuned. Then you have the actual harmonic, which you would think would be octaves, right? You'd think this would be octaves because it goes up 1 octave here. But not actually, because if I turn this down to 0, I get nothing. And that's because this works in a ratio system. It's not just straight up first octave, second octave, third octave. How this works is that when you multiply this number by 2, then you get another octave up. See, 1 times 2 is 2. So we get another octave up. 2 times 2 is 4, so we get another octave up. 4 times 2 is 8, so we get another octave up. So it works in those ratio increments. So the best thing to do if you want to play a really low note, like I'm playing right here, is if you have a keyboard, turn the octave on your keyboard down, or you can go into FL Studio and turn it down this way. I'm just right-clicking right there. And I'm also sure there's ways to do that in other programs as well. But yes, as I said, if you want to import your serum tables in here, you can totally do that. Like, let's take a spectral table. Let's take a Monster 5, which is very popular. I can just throw that right in here. And I can do everything that I could do with any other wavetable. And what's also fun is if you click this little pencil right here, you open up the wavetable editor, which is actually very different from what Serums is like. For example, if you click this, you have the option to kind of filter the wavetable. And that's filtering the actual wave. You can change a lot about it like that. By clicking this, you can go in and actually affect the individual harmonics. And I believe these knobs down here are the phases of each individual harmonic. Like if I were to go down to the fundamental right here and change the phase, you can see this kind of swim around. Yeah, like that. There's this right here, which will help you just generate like a sine wave like this, and then you can control it from here. Control the phase of it like this, the origin, and the mix. This is especially good when you have a sound that does not have much low end, but you really want it to have low end. Like let's say, for example, I go into here and I take out the low end. Let's say I had a table like this. You're like, oh, okay, that's cool, but I really want some bass in here. I could just go like this, create a sine wave, and then just mix it in until I can see the phases balancing out. And it sounds a lot better. By clicking this guy right here, I can actually edit the wave itself. Make it a little more edgy and digital like that. And then by clicking right here, I can kind of make a shape that's a little more unique in the sense that it's kind of basic and more curvy. Like I can create my own sort of bending motion like this with a bunch of points. Like that. It's just kind of that dot organization that's kind of interesting. Anyways, the next thing I want to mention is when you're adding two different things, like let's say I want to add a wavetable and I want to add a noise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to create a new group. So let's say I go like this and create a new group, and I'm going to make this group for the noise, because what I'm going to have to do here is also add another output. So what we have here is we have two different groups. I have a group for the wavetable and I have a group for the noise, and they each have their individual output, right? If I were to create just a noise in the group with the wavetable, then I can move it up here and it would all be routed into this out. Everything would be in one output thing right here. And I don't want that. I want to be able to kind of mix these together in different ways. So what I like to do is just add an output for the wavetable and then create the new group to add another noise. And then make sure to add an output for that as well. That way I can send it to different lanes. Now, what do I mean by lanes? I'm going to get to that in a second, but what I want to say right here also is that you do have some other things going on in here. You also get to add some effects like distortion or a filter actually in here without going into the effects section. And there's other utilities like the group, there's the aux, there's a mix and there's an output, just different kind of utilities that you can use there. I'm not going to go too deep into those right now. So now I'm going to go over this effects section right here, and what I'm going to add is I'm actually going to add a wavetable and a sampler. Now with the sampler, it's pretty basic. I don't think I need to go over this too much. You just have to load a sample into here. There's a lot of samples that you can pull up in their default section. You can even add your own folders. So let's say I have this harp sound here that I want to mix with this sine pluck. I think they could go together potentially pretty well. However, there's a problem. I want to take out the fundamental frequency of this harp sound and replace it with that. You know what I'm saying? I want to EQ this, and I want to take out the muddy low end and add some effects to that, but I don't want it to affect my sine wave. The best thing to do is to put it in a different lane, because we have 3 effect lanes right here. So this first one, this sine wave, is going into lane 1. I'm going to have this go into lane 2, and I'm going to route lane 1 and lane 2 to both go into the master afterwards, so they're not going into each other. So now if I mute lane 1, we just have the harp, and if I mute lane 2, we just have the sine wave. So for the sine wave, I think I just want to add a basic reverb. There's a bunch of different effects we can add here, but I want a reverb. Actually, no, before I do the reverb, I want a delay. I want this to kind of decay a little bit. So let's mute the harp. So I have some delay right there. That's very nice. And now I can throw some reverb on it. So here's the reverb. That's a lot of reverb. So the sine wave sounds pretty good. Now let's work on the harp. It's a little bit ugly, so let's go ahead and EQ it. Let's say I want to, let's just add a filter. Here's a filter right here. I'm going to change it to high pass. And I'm going to get rid of most of that fundamental there. And then I actually want to add something kind of to spread it out, maybe an assemble. Yeah, and now let's add a little bit of verb. Now it sounds a little better. It can mix with our sine wave easier. Of course, this isn't quite loud enough. Actually, what I'm going to do is reroute these to go into lane 3, so now we can add effects on everything in general. Like, for example, if I wanted to be weird and add some kind of distortion, that could totally be done. Add some distortion here. Let's just saturate it maybe. That's weird, and maybe I could do like a bit crush or something. Here's a bit crush. Yeah, it's a little bit more useful. But you see how we can route everything. I can route one of these through lane 1, one of these through lane 2, and then I can route them all through lane 3 if I want to. And another great thing is that I can add as many of these as I want. Like, for example, there's already a delay here, but if I wanted to, I could just add another delay. It doesn't make any difference. It's not like Serum where you will run out of the delays or something like that. You will always have all of these plugins at your fingertips, and these go on maybe forever. I haven't reached the limit. Like I've said before, I've never reached the limit of how many I can add, and if there is one, probably won't bother most people. The last thing I'm going to get to here is the modulation section right here, where we can add modulators. We have the option to have envelope, LFO, random, and then there's MIDI, and then there's utility. Those are a little different. Like MIDI, I can control like different things as far as like the note that I'm hitting and the pressure and the velocity and stuff like that. But what I'm going to focus on right now is the most common ones, which are envelope and LFO. So with an envelope, you obviously have your basic envelope here, but nothing's happening, but that's because we have not attached anything to it. Now let me just bring this down and create a more basic shape. Like let's bring the decay up a little bit, the sustain all the way up, but the release down. That's kind of a basic shape. And if I were to add that to, let's say, let me hit plus and add that to the frame here. Let me just move this up. I can modulate it like that. See, it's going up to that frame and then jumping back down. If I were to add some attack like this, now we're moving it with the LFO, and I could kind of maybe bring this sustain down. So now we have a more practical envelope modulation here. Then let's say it's going into lane 1, I can just add a filter or something like this. Let's add a filter right here. We can make it, yeah, let's make it a bandpass filter. So let's make the filter, let's add a little Q. Sounds pretty juicy. And now let's add it as a modulation. Let's add a compressor maybe. Let's compress that a little bit. Maybe add some distortion. Let's add some saturation here. Let's make it saturate. think there's a little too much bass going in this distortion. That's pretty easy. I can just add an EQ and put it before the distortion. Then I can just control the lows. Let's add a disperser. A disperser is really cool. Let's kind of find a sweet spot here. You can make your sounds kind of juicy. So I like it about here. Add some interesting stuff. And finally, I just add a little bit of bit crushing. It just adds a little high end. And then if I want, let's say I don't want this to decay that much. Let's say I want to sustain. That's kind of intense. But let's say I wanted it to stay right here. But I want it to kind of hover back and forth. I can add an LFO. And I can add it to, I mean, literally anything from the effect chain, or I can just add it to the level itself. I think I'm just going to do it to the level itself. Let's see, go up to this level. %50 is a good spread. Now we can just change how fast it goes. We can sync it up to our rhythm. Let's see, 4 to 32. Maybe faster. 2 to 32. That's pretty cool. Let me change the phase. So that's a really easy way to use the modulation system. All right, now I know that took a minute. However, I do still want to go over this snare that I made because it really is interesting. I like Faceplant for drums really better than Serum in my opinion, because I could add everything that I want right here, and it's also modular. I can add all the effects that I want in any order. It's great. But right now I'm just gonna click minimize to minimize everything that I have going right here. Alright, now that that's done, it's going to be a lot easier to see what all is going on. I have these 4 groups right here. The first one is going to be our transient, the little click at the beginning. Sounds like that. The next one is going to be our fundamental, kind of the bottom of the snare. The one after that is going to be the tail, kind of airy tail. And lastly, we have this kind of organic sounding hit. Yeah, it's kind of metallic. It all groups together to create something like this before the effects in the effects chain. That's our basic snare, just straight out, dry out of Faceplant. Let's look at this. Group 1 is just noise. And you can see the out is very short. It's very small. It's just a quick transient, and it's going through just lane 1. As you can see right here, it's just coming through there. In lane 1, I have a distortion, a hard clip, which I'm just driving it up. I have a transient shaper, bringing the attack up to make it even sharper, and then I have a filter to cut out the low end. After this, I have the sub, which is just a wavetable. It's just a sine wave right here. I brought the harmonic down to the frequency that I wanted, and I have the out doing something like this. You can see it has a little bit of attack going here. There's a little bit of attack. The sustain's about halfway, and I turned the decay down, so it's pretty sharp. The gain is actually also getting modulated by envelope 1 here. You can see how I brought this to like 40%. And it's doing this, just a quick cut. I want a little more control than just this out right here. And also for this guy's effects, I have a couple different things. I have a disperser, which is kind of just messing it up, doing some interesting stuff. Makes it a little more natural and less just like pure sine wavy. I got a bit of distortion, some overdrive there, have some compression, just bumping it down. Transient shaping, again adding a little bit of attack here, make it a bit sharper, and then a compressor at the end. After that we have the tail. And this is on noise, just some stable noise right here. And they have this kind of natural volume shape where it rises up and then fades out to mimic that tail. And there's a couple things I have going on here. I have a phase distortion, which is also using to kind of spread it out. It kind of spreads it out a little bit if you do it correctly. Then I have a filter, which is getting automated by this envelope right here that has this shape. If I were to bring the Q factor up, it's basically going like this. Because when I make a snare sound with my mouth, it goes poosh, like I have a poosh in there. So that's kind of what that is doing. And I have a 3-band EQ to take out the low and a little bit of the very high end. Make it sound a little more organic. And then lastly, the metallic hit. This is actually not getting any effects at all. It's just going right out to the master. There was really nothing I had to do. I just had to mess around with the gain for it to fit in enough. Also, I forgot to mention this filter right here in the middle, this just really short one, is actually controlling the sub right here, when I have the low frequency, it's controlling the harmonic. As you can hear, it's kind of sliding down really quickly. Just creates a little more attack. So now, as I played before, all together we have this. It's time to add a few effects to this snare that we have going right here. The first one is definitely an EQ. It's just kind of shape it, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm boosting a bit of the low end. I'm just doing some stuff that I like to make it sound good. After that is going into a wave shaper where I'm kind of cranking it, like I'm hard clipping it and adding a little bit of saturation. Makes it a good deal stronger right there already. After that, I actually have a patcher, which I do this to a lot of my basses. I will split it up. You see, this is the high band, this is the mid band, and this is the low band. And then I'll put 2 soft clippers on each when they all do this. This is just going to add saturation across all the bands, making it even stronger and louder. And then we have Serum effects right here, just a couple of things. I have a phaser that's doing like a guitar amp effect. Just bringing that down. There's not too much going on there. It just kind of shapes it in a way that I kind of like. And then I have multi-band compression. Of course, the release is up, threshold down, to really bring out those harmonics and that power. Then I have an EQ again, where I control the high end a little more and I add a little bit more in the low end. Just do some detail work. And then after that, I have a wave shaper, once again, just cranking it with some hard clipping. And there's where we get some real impact, because now this is very loud going out of the EQ. Like you can see on the master coming out of the EQ that this is pretty loud. I have a limiter on the master right now, but you can see it in channel 1. And so adding this wave shaper will definitely like cut off that end and carve it really tight and really sharp, and giving it a good transient. And then we can just render it out into Edison. Now I rendered it out and I also shortened it, so this one is much shorter and it has a much cleaner tail than this, because you can definitely hear that there's a little bit of weird stuff happening on the tail. It's a little bit of buzzing that I wanted to get rid of, so just render it out and fade it out. And that is how I made the snare in Faceplant. I didn't have to use any other instances. It was just this one instance, because you can add as much as you want. Alright guys, thank you so much for sticking with me through this video. What I think of Faceplant is I have some mixed feelings about it. It depends really on what I want to do if I'm going to buy it. If you are looking to make some interesting sounds, you know, like if you're a sound designer and you really want to mess around with all the weird stuff that you have going on here, I recommend it. You know, I kind of like it because of that. If you're just trying to make some quick, like heavy bass sounds, you know, something like that, then Serum is probably your better bet. I like how Serum does the wavetables better. However, if you're making, you know, something like drums like I did right here, or if you want to just do a bunch of layers in one synth, it really is nice. Or if you want to make like classic synth sounds, it's also very good for that. It's very powerful. Again, the best part of it, I think, is that it's modular. You can add as many of all this stuff as you want in whatever order you want. So that wraps up this video about iZotope's Faceplant. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.